being here today, and you certainly have brought a breath of fresh air from the standpoint to your positions from the standpoint of having some real-world experience besides being a bureaucrat. So now you're bringing some of that expertise in, and we appreciate that. Mr. Hood, my first question is for you. You know, I'm very concerned about CECL. I have requested from numerous associations and entities with regards to the effect on it. And two of your credit union associations, NAFQ and CUNA, and gave me some information here. And let me just read from their studies. NAFQ says that almost everyone's capital is going to be negatively impacted in some way. There's going to be a rise in the cost of credit to the consumer. There's going to be constraint in the amount of credit available. The credit unions are going to be making fewer loans to members, primarily in the mortgage and commercial loan space. And the real kicker to the whole other thing here is their chart on the back that shows there's going to be a $30 billion hit to the capital accounts of the members of this association. That is significant. CUNA did a study. Their numbers came back, completely eliminate specific loan offerings to reduce the CECL impact. 15% likely will do that. To tighten credit standards to offset or reduce CECL's impact, 31%. And increase loan rates or increase loan fees to offset or reduce CECL's financial impact, 35%. Would you like to comment on that?
I share the concerns that have all been raised by the industry groups you've cited. We as an industry or we as an agency are also doing our own internal studies with our chief economists. I find the operational burdens that are going to be imposed by CECL to really be really difficult for a lot of our smaller credit unions to manage and operate in that environment. We, though, will need more assistance from FASB to address some of these issues. I do have a little bit of comfort in that a lot of our institutions, whether they be credit unions or community banks, will be exempted from doing a lot of the complex formal forecasting that's required.
This will affect their customers, will it not? In fact, when you start talking about raising costs,
it could have a deleterious impact on their ability. Yes, sir, it could have a deleterious impact.
We had the home builders in here twice already, and they made a comment, $1,000 increase in the cost of a home loan, 100,000 people across the country no longer have access to funds. That is a devastating number. Mr. Quarles and Mr. Otting and Ms. Williams and Mr. Hood, one quick question here for each one of you. FASB admits they did not study this. They did not do a cost-benefit analysis. They didn't study the economic impact across the country or on consumers. This is a huge rule that they're proposing, similar to what they did with mark-to-market. And look at the disastrous result of exacerbating the downturn, in my mind, is what happened with mark-to-market before they had to pull it. Would you, Mr. Quarles, Mr. Otting, Ms. Williams, and Mr. Hood, do your agencies go out and make a rule of that nature and not study it and not have a cost-benefit analysis on it? Mr. Quarles?
We're required, and I think it's good practice to have a good cost-benefit analysis of any rule.
Mr. Otting, would your agency do that?
We would not.
Ms. Williams?
It is always good practice to provide and conduct analysis before
Mr.
you.
Hood?
I agree. We will conduct an analysis and use our chief economist to come up with a cost-benefit analysis.
Wouldn't it be great if all of you would ask them to pause on this and do a study to see the impact, because it's going to have a dramatic impact on all the entities that you regulate?
Yes, sir. I would be willing to work with them on that, especially because of credit being managed to underserved communities.
Ms. Williams, Mr. Diamond from J.P. Morgan was here last week and asked the question of him with regards to the impact. And he came back with this comment. He said, look, my bank is big enough. We don't have to worry about this. We can absorb the cost. But he said there's a lot of small banks and credit unions that can't. You're going to see a huge problem with them with regards to pricing on this. And then he said some will virtually have to stop lending because of the pro-cyclical nature of this thing when we have an economic downturn. Would you agree with that?
Based on my exposure and interactions with community bankers, that seems to be a prevailing opinion among the community banks as well.
Fantastic. With that in mind, here we have a situation where we have a rule that is being implemented. It's not been studied. It's going to have a dramatic impact on the economy, on the very entities that you all are reviewing and regulating, and they're going to have to, the pro-cyclical nature, this to me, the pro-cyclical nature of this thing is what's devastating, because whenever we have a downturn in the economy, they're going to have to find a way to raise more money, more capital, and have to probably cut back on services and lending to the very people who we want to be able to help. I would hope that you'd be working with me to be able to put some pressure on FASB to be able to just stop and study this, and I appreciate your continued studying of this and working with us. Thank you very much. I yield back.
The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, is recognized for 5 minutes.